It started with a small, almost forgettable moment. No dramatic entrance, no confident speech, no impressive appearance. Just a man sitting quietly in a crowded cafe where everyone was talking, scrolling, laughing, trying to be seen, yet somehow nobody noticed him at first. And that's what made the shift so terrifyingly powerful, because when someone finally spoke to him, something strange happened. Within minutes, the conversation slowed down, eye contact lasted longer, voices softened, and people leaned in closer without realizing they were doing it. And by the end of the night, strangers who had known him for less than an hour were sharing personal stories, defending him in debates, and describing him with phrases like, "I trust him," or "he feels different," even though they couldn't logically explain why. And here's the uncomfortable truth. This wasn't luck, charm, or coincidence. It was psychology, pure and precise. Because the human brain decides who it likes long before logic gets involved, long before personality is judged, and long before words even matter. And that decision happens automatically, silently, and emotionally based on signals you were probably sending wrong without realizing it, because nobody teaches us how likability actually works. They tell us to be nice, confident, or yourself. But none of that explains why some people are instantly liked while others are ignored no matter how hard they try. And the reason is simple but disturbing. People don't like people. They like emotional experiences, and every interaction you have is evaluated not by who you are, but by how the other person feels about themselves when they're around you, which means most people fail at likability because they focus outward, trying to impress, perform, or prove, while the brain of the other person is only asking one selfish question: how does this person make me feel right now? And once you understand that question, everything changes. Because likability stops being mysterious and starts becoming mechanical, almost programmable, and that's where the invisible switch comes in. The psychological switch that turns indifference into curiosity, curiosity into comfort, and comfort into trust. And this switch is flipped not by confidence or charisma, but by emotional safety, familiarity, and subtle validation. Things so quiet they feel natural, yet so powerful they override skepticism. And the reason this works is because humans evolved to like those who reduce uncertainty and emotional threat, not those who are impressive. And that's why loud confidence often repels while calm presence attracts. And why the man in that cafe didn't chase attention. He created emotional gravity, pulling people in without force, without manipulation they could detect, and without saying anything extraordinary, because the brain prefers what feels familiar, predictable, and safe. And once that preference is triggered, logic shuts down and attachment begins. And this is why people sometimes trust strangers more than friends, why certain voices feel calming, why some people are forgiven easily while others are judged harshly, and why you've probably met someone who did almost nothing yet left a strong impression on you because they activated something ancient inside your nervous system, something you didn't consciously choose. And the scary part is this: once that switch is flipped, people start defending you, remembering you, and giving you social permission automatically. And they don't even realize they're doing it, because from their perspective, it feels like chemistry or good vibes. But in reality, it's pattern recognition and emotional conditioning at work. And today, you're about to learn how that conditioning happens, how to activate it intentionally, and how to stop unknowingly sabotaging your own likability. Because most people are not disliked. They're emotionally unsafe without realizing it. They rush, they over-explain, they seek approval, they try to be interesting. And every one of those behaviors signals uncertainty to the brain, lowering perceived value, while the people who are liked the most do the opposite. They regulate emotions, mirror energy, and let others feel seen without trying to control the outcome. And once you understand this, you stop chasing people and start attracting them. You stop begging for attention and start receiving it. And the most dangerous part is that after this point, you can never unsee it, because you'll notice the patterns everywhere. In leaders, influencers, manipulators, and even quiet individuals who somehow command respect without effort. And as you go deeper into this, you'll realize that being liked is not out being good, kind, or impressive. It's about understanding how the human mind seeks comfort, validation, and significance. And if you stay until the end, you'll learn the same psychological shortcuts used to create instant emotional bonds. The kind that make people say, "I don't know why, but I like you," and mean it with their whole nervous system. The moment you understand this next psychological hack, you'll realize why some people feel instantly familiar, comforting, and trustworthy, even when you've just met them. And it has nothing to do with shared interests, humor, or intelligence, because the human brain doesn't bond through logic. It bonds through recognition. And recognition is created when someone feels emotionally seen, not intellectually impressed, which is why the most powerful likability skill is not talking, but reflecting, because deep down, every human being is walking around with an invisible hunger to be understood. And when that hunger is met, the brain releases dopamine and oxytocin automatically, labeling the person who triggered it as safe, similar, and important. And here's the uncomfortable truth. People don't like you because of your personality. They like you because parts of their personality feel validated around you. And this is why the mirror effect works so dangerously well, because when you subtly reflect someone's emotional state, communication style, and core values, not by copying like a parrot, but by aligning, you create a sense of psychological familiarity that bypasses skepticism, and the brain loves familiarity because it reduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is perceived as threat. So when someone feels this person gets me, their nervous system relaxes, their defenses lower, and trust begins before logic has time to intervene. And this is why strangers can sometimes feel closer than lifelong friends, because the brain prioritizes emotional resonance over history, and most people fail at this because they listen to respond, not to recognize. They wait for their turn to speak instead of absorbing emotional cues. And in doing so, they miss the signals that actually create connection: tone, pace, hesitation, excitement, frustration, because those signals reveal the emotional frequency someone is operating on. And when you tune into that frequency and respond in harmony, the interaction feels smooth, effortless, almost magnetic. And here's where it becomes manipulative without looking manipulative. You don't need to agree with what someone says. You only need to validate why they feel that way, because the brain doesn't crave agreement. It craves emotional acknowledgement. So when someone complains, resist the urge to fix. When someone brags, resist the urge to compete. When someone doubts themselves, resist the urge to lecture, because every time you override their emotional experience, you subtly signal you're wrong to feel this way, and the brain registers that as emotional danger. But when you validate the feeling, even briefly, you send the opposite signal. You make sense. And that single signal can create more likability than hours of conversation. Because humans trust those who make them feel reasonable, not those who make them feel corrected. And once this emotional alignment happens, something strange occurs. The other person starts projecting positive qualities onto you, assuming depth, intelligence, kindness, and confidence, even if you haven't displayed them overtly, because the brain fills gaps with favorable assumptions when emotional safety is present. And this is why people often say things like, "I don't know why, but I feel like I can talk to you," because what they're really saying is, my nervous system feels regulated around why you. And this regulation is addictive, because most people are internally chaotic, emotionally rushed, and mentally overstimulated. So anyone who provides calm recognition becomes psychologically valuable. And here's the part most people miss. Mirroring is not about being fake. It's about being precise. Because when you mirror values rather than opinions, emotions rather than words, and energy rather than behavior, the connection feels authentic, not forced. And once that connection is established, influence becomes effortless. Because people are more open to those they feel similar to. And similarity creates trust faster than competence ever could, which means if you master this, you'll stop chasing likability and start triggering it automatically. And people won't say you're impressive. They'll say something far more powerful: "I feel comfortable with you," without realizing that comfort is the gateway to attraction, loyalty, and long-term influence. Most people think likability is about energy, being funny, expressive, talkative, engaging, but the human brain interprets those behaviors very differently than we expect. Because while enthusiasm can attract attention, restraint attracts respect, and respect creates influence, which is why the people who quietly control rooms are rarely the loudest ones. And this control doesn't come from dominance, intimidation, or superiority. It comes from emotional regulation, because the brain constantly scans for emotional stability. And when it detects someone who isn't rushed, reactive, or desperate to be validated, it assigns higher status automatically. And here's the uncomfortable truth: talking too much, explaining yourself, filling every silence, and reacting instantly all signal emotional need, and emotional need signals lower value at a subconscious level. Even if the content of your words is intelligent or kind, while the person who speaks slowly, pauses naturally, and chooses words with intention creates psychological weight because silence forces the other person's mind to work. And the mind always projects meaning onto uncertainty, often exaggerating it, which is why a calm pause can feel more confident than a perfect explanation. And when you don't rush to prove yourself, the brain assumes you don't need to, which flips the power dynamic without confrontation, without aggression, and without manipulation that looks like manipulation. And this is where the craving begins, because humans are wired to seek approval from those they perceive as emotionally self-sufficient. And emotional self-sufficiency feels rare in a world where everyone is chasing attention, likes, and validation. So when someone encounters a person who is comfortable not performing, not overreacting, and not chasing agreement, they feel slightly off balance. And that imbalance creates curiosity. And curiosity is the first step toward desire, because the brain wants to resolve uncertainty. And it does that by leaning in, asking questions, and seeking feedback. Which means the moment you stop trying to be liked, people start trying to earn your reactions. And this doesn't mean being cold or distant. It means being grounded, because grounded people don't rush emotionally, they don't explain themselves to be understood, and they don't panic when silence appears. And that calm creates a subtle psychological authority that others instinctively respond to. And this is why people often feel nervous around quiet confidence, but also drawn to it, because it triggers both respect and intrigue at the same time. And the dangerous part is this: once people begin seeking your reactions, your approval becomes valuable, and value creates influence. And influence changes how people treat you, listen to you, and remember you, all without you demanding anything. And if you observe carefully, you'll notice this pattern everywhere: in leaders, negotiators, therapists, and even manipulators. Those who control their emotional output control the emotional environment, and whoever controls the emotional environment quietly controls the interaction, which means likability is not about giving more, it's about leaking less. Because the less reactive you are, the more stable you appear, and stability is one of the most attractive psychological traits a human can display. And once you master this, people won't describe you as nice or fun, they'll describe you as grounded, calm, and confident without fully understanding why. And those descriptions are the mental shortcuts the brain uses to justify the deeper truth, that you made them feel emotionally anchored, and emotional anchoring is far more powerful than entertainment ever could be.